MySQL, the platform, has been in a bumpy ride for the past 4 years. And this is specifically exacerbated by in 2018 when they released MySQL version 8. And there's a lot of decisions that have been made in that product that kind of turned a lot of customers away from the product, unfortunately, despite we love MySQL, right? And I've been one of the first users of MySQL back in, when everyone uses MySQL for web development, right? It's a very popular database platform. So in this video, I'll go through this little bit of a bumpy ride that MySQL have been having for the past 4 years. What is wrong with MySQL 8? From the decision to rewrite the software almost completely from 5.6 to version 8, to introducing a huge amount of features, which you might think is a good thing, but led to a lot of bugs. And the most important thing, performance regressions. Yes, MySQL 8 is slower than 5.6 and 5.7 and slower than MariaDB and slower than Postgres. You know, people install the product and all of a sudden I'm not saying everything, most of the normal use cases that users have degraded, not by a lot, but it's significant that you can actually notice it, right? So I'll talk about all of that in this episode. Let's jump into it. So before we get started, of course, this is not a negative video. I like to just, try to learn from others' mistakes, because MySQL definitely made mistakes here. It clearly is making some mistakes. And can we as engineers learn and improve from them? I'm not asking anyone to change or anything like that. We're just pointing and looking at whatever the current situation is, right? So with that out of the way, I'll first start with this first blog, small datum, from the OG himself, Mark Callahan. Mark Callaghan. Is it Callahan or Callaghan? I can't pronounce his name. Callaghan, I think. Right? He is basically, his full-time job is just running performance regressions on databases on different versions. He compile, from the source, he compiled the databases because they are open source. They compile on his beefy machines, and he run regression and say, okay, this is faster than this is faster than this release has a regression, or this Postgres 17 is faster than this, but it's slower than this. So what he does, out of the kindness of his heart, is he report back to the community. Say, hey guys, I found a regression in this release, and he submit a bug. And most of the time, the community listens, fixes, releases the next version. Boom, ba doom, bam, pa. Everything is fixed. Everything is great, right? Some of his regressions are just simple configurations. Oh yeah, we changed this default. Is no longer we no longer always cleaning up the index by default, right? It's off now, or it's auto. Now you have, if you want the old behavior, change the config to the old one, and you be good to go. And something is like this, and I talked about this in certain videos. So this is what's happening, right? So this is what Mark does, and this blog is just one tiny example from almost daily blogs that he posts. And this is MySQL InnoDB versus Sysbench on large server. So he's putting a large server. You can read it for yourself here, but I want to just show you the graph here. Just going through the graphs, right? For people listening to this episode, we're comparing 5.7.44, that's MySQL 5.744 to 8.0.39. That's the most commonly used version, 8.0. Not a lot of people are on 8.4 and 9. Okay, so and on the vertical axis we have the queries per second. It's a relative, just a relative scale, and then just a bunch of tests. And the blue line is 5.7, the red is 8.0, and you can clearly see that 8.0 is always lower than 5.7, i.e. 5.7 makes way more queries per second versus 8.0. Yeah, so your queries naturally has slowed down. Okay, so that's the first chart here. right? And this is just the latest, by the way, right? So if you go back to his history of blogs, you'll always see this. Sometimes there will be a blip, sometimes 8 will win, but in this particular case, random points, right? Random ranges, range queries, point queries. Point queries is basically when you have one thing you know about and you want to always go to it, right? So it's random essentially, but you know the ID, for example, or the index or the key, and you want to go to that page, right? It's point query. You're fetching one row or even a little bit of a collection of rows, but from a specific known value. Okay, so that's what point queries are. So again, point queries part 2, same thing. 5.7 smashes. Range queries, very popular queries, where this between this and this. Give me all the results where the ID is between 1 and 100, or the date is between this date and this date. Very popular. If you have an index on that, we're going to use these beautiful linked chain leaf pages, and then we're going to, when we find the low page and the high page, and then we just pull everything between. Very fast, very nice. Now, it depends on the kind of query, and you can go and his regression is just open source. You can go and fetch everything, and then and this from this range. Now you want to go and actually fetch from the main source. Now it depends if the range is on the primary index. You don't need to go anywhere. The primary index is the table, right? Because it's clustered. MySQL is always clustered, right? Unlike Postgres. So you have right there and there, right? Just you get everything. If you're on a secondary index, you scan this range. Then if you want more, you have to go back to the primary index. And this is where you might get some randomness, right? Random IO. Because whatever consecutive in the secondary index doesn't have to be necessary consecutive in the primary index. Range queries part 2. Again, hey, actually, yeah, range query part 2, another kind of regressions. There is one case. All cases, of course, 5.7 wins, always on 8.0, which is the, right? Tells you like new doesn't mean better, right? And the read-only workload, right, is actually better in 8.0, way better, right? That's the only thing. There's another one. Read-only on a range larger than 10,000, right? If you have that and that, 8.0 wins. So that's what we've been saying. Not everything is like slow in 8.0, right? There are cases where 8.0 wins. And there are features in 8.0 that I'm really fascinated about. And I'm going to make another video, right, about these features. Okay? We didn't lose faith in MySQL. We just a little bit disappointed, if you will, But yeah, there are beautiful features. Amazing engineers worked on these new features. And I want to really address that, right? That there are features that are really... So let's move next. Here's a case where MySQL 8 is actually faster all across the board. Writes. If you're doing writes, MySQL 8 smashes. And this is possibly why that feature I was talking about. The new feature which allows concurrent writes and reads to the same index, which you cannot do in 5.6. I'll make another video just to talk about that. This is worked by amazing engineers working on this stuff. The B+3, in summary, the B+3, when you write something, it may change this structure of the B3, right? Because sometimes a page split happens. Sometimes you have to split the internal node. Sometimes even the root need to split. If you do that, then you need to lock the entire index. That's what 5.7 and 5.6 does. It just locks the entire thing. So hey, we're going to change something, so let's block all read. It's going to do an exclusive lock. So reads are blocked as a result. And of course, writes as a result will be blocked. If you're doing concurrent writes and reads at the same time, you will see the feeling of slowness, right? Because of this, right? In 8, they did a very beautiful algorithm that allowed concurrent reads while you're writing, even if you're modifying the schema, or not the schema, the structure of the B+3. So we're no longer acquiring an exclusive lock, but if you're trying to do a little bit of a multiple concurrent writes, sometimes you'll get away with it, sometimes you'll have to acquire the concurrency, but concurrency is better in 8.0 essentially. So that might be one of the reasons. And then he compares Postgres, this is not the topic of Postgres. Of course, Postgres here is also in certain situations, it's faster. So now, you might say, why not upgrade to 8.4 and let's compare 8.4 or 8.9? Maybe MySQL 9 is faster, right? Well, we go to this article by Percona. Do not upgrade to any version of MySQL after 8.0.37. That's from July 11, 2024. This bug, there is a bug that has been introduced in this version. And of course, when you introduce it, when you introduce a feature or a fix or anything, what you do is you port this fix everywhere. So naturally, when you introduce a fix that has a bug, you can technically introduce this bug everywhere in all the releases. So what is affected, this bug is in 8.0.38, 8.4.1, and 9.0 as well. So what is this bug that you're talking about? Well, the bug is, if you have large number of tables, like 10,000 tables, MySQL daemon will crash at restart. 10,000 is not a lot. That's not a lot of tables. We're talking about tables here. So Jean-Francois, who found this bug. So this bug, if you have 10,000 table, what is happening is there is in startup, if MySQL reads the first page from every table and tries to do certain, because it needs certain metadata information about the table, and it's in the first page of the table. So you read first page, and apparently memory leak or certain things, if you have a lot of tables and you're reading all this metadata, you'll crash after 10,000. Now, why you're reading that? Can you improve this read? There are a lot of complexity that comes with this, right? There's I'm talking kernel stuff, like operating system kernel stuff. Like if you read a page, if I read a page, you don't need the whole page. So that's a wasted 16K. That's the page size in MySQL, right? So you're reading 16K and you're using, 1 kilobyte, right? So then you might say, all right, I'm going to read 16K. That's what the MySQL does. But the OS has a mind of its own. 16K is a lot. You're reading 16K. There's something called read ahead in the kernel. And it says, it's 16K, but you know what? We know you better. We know better than you. Now, we're the OS. We know everything. Okay? You're just a user. So we're going to read ahead. We're going to read more. Because since you're reading 16K, I don't know, maybe you're going to need more. 16K is a lot, right? So we're going to read more. I'm sorry. So the kernel itself is actually doing more I/O, more bandwidth on the SSD, bringing more in the OS cache, page cache, and of course the user space, which is MySQL in this case, it just has a 16K, right? But it is slower. If I'm reading, if I say read 16K, which you shouldn't read 60K, you just need one, right? That's one fix you can do, right? Right away. But if you're reading 16K and then the OS reads, 30, that's going to take longer. Yeah, I know you said this, but yeah, internally we're going to do 30K. So that operation is, it can be asynchronous. You know what I mean. But essentially that the length of the command is not going to be faster once it grades 16K. It's not going to return. It's going to return when you read the whole 30K, right? The whole read ahead, right? So that's one thing. So that's one thing you can configure, of course, and you can tell You can tell the kernel, hey, I want to hint that I actually just need 16K, or I just actually need one. So don't read ahead, don't read all the stuff. And that's what the fix is. It's way more complicated than I'm kidding. There's so much other, system stuff going on. Just a small correction here. This bug was fixed in version 39, 8.4.2, and 9.0.1, right? But if you have MySQL, don't use any of these versions, which is 38, 8.4.1, and 9.0. So I just wanted to clarify that part as well, right? But this is the critical bug, right? But even though Mark Callaghan said, let's try 8.4, maybe it's better. Download MySQL 8.4, compiles without problem. Sysbench results are similar to 8.0.36. Most notable changes are my CNV is that AnoDB change buffer is disabled by default. Hope it isn't getting deprecated. So 8.4 is not any faster than 8.0. So what is going on with MySQL? What is really going on with MySQL in general? Right? Let's talk about a little bit of these performance regressions. And this is again from Percona. So let's highlight some of these stuff and discuss them. How about we do that? So we've seen how many other regressions. Point queries are slower, range queries are slower, writes are faster. But now he just discovered that deletes in AnoDB compared to RocksDB in this particular case is slower. And there's update non-index versus index columns. That's also another performance issue. So let's read about the evolution of 8.0. What's going on with the 8.0? Why is 8.0 at this stage? 8.0 series had a somewhat turbulent journey, especially before version 8.0.34. 34 started to stabilize. 36 now is good. 37, I think 38 was the bad one. Now you should move to 39. 38 had the crash bug on the daemon. Right? During this period, new features were frequently added with almost every release. While this pace of development was exciting, of course, like we like new features, it has also introduced numerous bugs and compatibility issues with previous versions, tools like extra backup. So when you add features, it's always inevitable that something will break. Always. Now, I always thought that it might not be always true, but it's always true. I've been in development for over 20 years, and I've seen this. We build software, right? Our company, and it's always the case. Feature. There's always bug there you never thought about, or a test that you wrote certain cases and you missed one, and it sneaked out in the software, and you fix it with patches. That's what you do. You find it, you patch it, and MySQL team is doing their best. They're fixing the critical bugs. And we don't know about the politics going on with Oracle and all this stuff, right? We don't know anything about this stuff. So maybe they don't have enough staff, enough development to maintain MySQL anymore. That's why they have limited resources. But it doesn't explain how many, like this amount of features that they have, right? It's just interesting. However, the introduction of the long-term support innovation releases has helped stabilize the 8.0. Interesting. So they have now long-term releases, and they just, all right, let's not introduce any new features. Let's just fix bugs. And we do this a lot in my company as well. We say, all right, this release, we really need to focus on just the performance and bug fixes. It's very common, right? And it's always a good thing. Always a good thing, So it's okay. You're not introducing new features, but you're making the software more stable and faster in performance, right? Right? Given these changes, it's understandable that some DBAs look back fondly on the perceived stability of MySQL 5.7. Because now DBA is like, hey, 5.7 works fine. Why do I need to upgrade? Yeah, are these JavaScript features that you added, all this store procedure that I can write a JavaScript-based store procedure, or this feature here and there, is it worth it? I don't need any of this stuff. I'm sticking to something that is stable. So you would blame them? You wouldn't blame people who do that, right? So let's compare the number of bugs in 5.7 and 8.0. While this number doesn't really mean that a lot, but it gives you an indication that, oh, if you have a lot of bugs and you're fixing a lot of bugs, it means it's almost like you rewrote the whole software and now you're fixing a lot of bugs because of it, right? There was even one theory as to why MySQL 8 is slower than 5.7 and across the board in certain cases, right? And this is because the code base got larger and the code became so modular. So what ended up happening is the excessive function calls caused a lot of, TLB misses. Because what you've been doing is now you read the code and now you say, all right, call this function. Oh, this function is all the way. Oh my God, I hit the light. It's all the way over there. Oh, you have to go and fetch the other page. When I'm saying page here, I'm talking about operating system virtual memory pages, right? Which translate to a physical page in memory. So it's a different location. So you go there and then you end up there and we call another function. And then you end up calling another function, which is a different place. So you could bouncing back and forth, And with that in mind, you keep more entries in the TLB and this TLB fills up as a result. And if it fills up, you'll have to delete the old pages and bring in new pages in, right? Because it's a limited. TLB is like a translation look-aside buffer that translates from virtual to physical. And it only has limited space. So if you keep switching so many pages, you'll end up getting slower performance in general. There's a lot of also other theories with CPU, overhead, memory overhead, stuff like that. And I'm not sure how much of this is being fixed. It's got better, but people still a little bit, reluctant to upgrade for some reason. A lot of people are just sticking in 5.733 for now. 5.7 does have a lot of bug fixes, but if you compare, 34, 35, 36, that is 8036, there's just way many bugs. So yeah, so that's like basic summary of the history between 5.7 and version MySQL 8.0. So in summary, what is going on is MySQL 8 is getting better, right? MySQL has had a little bit of a major rewrite, which added a lot of features. Because to add features, you need to sometimes rewrite the software to make adding features easier. So some of you might understand that. So if your goal is to add features, you might need to rewrite the software. But in the course of rewriting the software, you're going to introduce bugs. And adding features will also introduce bugs. And slowly, you're into this grind of bug fixing and performance regressions that you're going to keep on going. So eventually, since 2018, the release of 8.0, up until today, we are still battling with performance issues in 8.0 compared to 5.7. Now, is it across the board? No. 8.0 is faster in some of these cases. Like I talked about, the concurrent writes, right, in general. But this still leaves people, the confidence level of people is not that great, if you think about it, right? Because I need to test this for myself, right? Now, if your workload isn't that massive and you want to take advantage of new features, I think upgrading to MySQL latest version is not bad at all. Right? You can take advantage of that. Right? Take the features. If those regressions, if you follow Mark's blog and say, all right, I understand that my application will be written to do these particular things. MySQL 8 isn't that great. Version 9 or whatever compared to 5.7 is really a showstopper for me. Is it really the end of the road? Maybe it's not the end of the road for me. It's not really the end of the world. I can live with that. So now you have to think about that. But in general, it's getting better. My community is listening to these bug reports and they're taking it seriously. and the product is being improved. Now, but there is this gap, this regressions that we're highlighting. Often when you upgrade to a new version, rarely you get regressions, in new software, like massive performance regressions like that, right? Now, all of these are being tackled. So in a year or two, MySQL 8 will perhaps bypass 5.7, but it is having a little bit of a turbulent journey currently, and Postgres is clearly winning. If you notice, right? And maybe Postgres became popular because of this, a little bit of a fumble, if you will, MySQL fumble. Postgres became really popular, and in 2023 is the most popular database, and maybe 2024 is going to remain there. Will MySQL come back? I think it will. I love MySQL. You need both. You need these two pillar databases, because they just make almost orthogonal design choices, and you cannot say this is better than this at all. The design choices for MySQL Anno is very different than Postgres, and some people criticize Postgres for this. So it all depends on what you're trying to do, but that's why understanding the fundamentals of database engineering. Time for a plug. Someone had built a course that talks about fundamentals. Right? You cannot read this article and understand anything without understanding fundamentals. That's why you need to head to databases.when and get a coupon for fundamentals of database course. More than 23 hours of gold content for you. Understanding the fundamentals. But yeah, all databases are great. Everything has a pros and cons, and we just need to understand it. We love this stuff. And I'm going to follow up this video with another video to talk about a very nice MySQL 8 feature that I absolutely love compared to 5.7. And that is blows 5.7 out of the window, right? Performance-wise, in that particular case. Right? So, that out of the way. I'm going to see you in the next one. Goodbye.